with Harvard, it looks like a big battle is shaping up, and I am here for it. Not to mention the fact that I think Harvard is beginning to recognize already that they have picked the wrong guy to go to battle with. So here's the Harvard president. No government, regardless of which party is in power, should dictate what private universities can teach, whom they can admit and hire, and which areas of study and inquiry they can pursue. So this is a sort of a pompous declaration of independence. We, Harvard, our private university, we're independent, we can do whatever we want. But of course, the do whatever we want doesn't really work when you are taking federal funds. No organization that takes federal money can do whatever it wants, which is not to say it isn't private or it isn't independent, but it is to say that it has to conform to federal laws. And I'll get in a moment to what these laws are, but let me just say the Trump administration is like, okay, Harvard, that's your stance. And so Trump has immediately frozen $2 billion in funding to Harvard. And basically said, until you get rid of all your DEI and until you stop discriminating against Jews and vilifying Jews in a manner that would never be tolerated if you say vilified blacks in this way. So until you establish a race-blind standard of dealing with ethnic groups, you're not going to get federal funding. Now, they haven't canceled all the federal funding. Apparently, Harvard gets something like $9 billion in federal funding. It's a good question why Harvard gets any money at all. This is a university, by the way, that has a giant endowment, over $50 billion. So they're a university that's quite capable of being self-sufficient. This may not be true of most, or certainly not all, other universities that get federal funding. Some of them are quite dependent on it. You pull the federal funding, the university goes flat on its back. But Harvard does get a fair amount of federal money, and direct grants are not the only way to get federal funding. Students get Pell Grants. They then turn around and pay that money in tuition. So there are different ways in which federal money makes its way to an institution like Harvard. But Trump, not content with cutting or at least holding the federal funding, has gone a step further. Perhaps Harvard should lose its tax-exempt status. So here he's really cutting close to the bone, because think about it. Most of the people who give money, private individuals, private foundations that give money to a place like Harvard, they count on getting a tax deduction. If Harvard loses its tax-exempt status, it doesn't just take away the federal money, but it takes away the attractiveness of Harvard for donors, because now if they give money to Harvard, they lose all that money. They don't get to take it off their taxes at all. But again, Trump here can appeal to a precedent that was set up by the left. You might remember a generation ago, the Democrats went after Bob Jones University. Bob Jones University, a small private Christian university, but apparently they had some sort of policy that forbade interracial dating. Now, I don't know why they had that policy. Maybe they thought it was somehow not permitted in the Bible or something like this, which I don't think is really true. But nevertheless, this was Bob Jones's policy. But the federal government decided we're going to destroy this university. We're going to take away its tax-exempt status. We're going to pull its federal funding. And at the time, Republicans raised the point that, listen, this is really an overreach of federal power. Why don't we let these universities along? I mean, this is not exactly like a national problem. Bob Jones is very much in a camp of its own. But the Democrats were like, no, if they're not in conformity with federal law to the letter, too bad for them, and down they go. Well, guess what? This principle is now coming back to haunt them. The left didn't have to worry about this because for a long time, Republicans would point to a double standard, but they would not do the opposite when they came to power. They wouldn't go after the liberal university. So what makes Trump different? He's like, all right, I'm going to take this exact Bob Jones principle, except the principle is a little different now. It's not just don't discriminate against blacks. It's don't discriminate against any ethnic group. You cannot give preferences to blacks and Hispanics over whites and Asians in university admissions and faculty hiring. In fact, in nothing at all. You have to apply a strict colorblind standard. Number two, you cannot treat men and women as interchangeable. It's one of the legacies of the civil rights movement that separate but equal, the doctrine that was objectionable in the case of race, is not objectionable in the area of gender. In fact, that's how we get women's sports. That's how we get Title IX. We have separate tournaments, separate spheres for men and women, and that includes, by extension, separate locker rooms, separate bathrooms, and so on. So the Trump administration here is on very strong ground, not only legally, but also politically, because these kinds of preferences are utterly objectionable to most Americans. Tariffs have admittedly thrown the global economy into some chaos. Potential widespread inflation tied to massive supply chain disruption is weighing heavily on the economy. But there's a silver lining that a lot of people have missed. President Trump specifically exempted gold and silver bullion from these sweeping tariffs. And that's good news. Policies are triggering significant financial chaos, but the administration has preserved your ability to diversify into precious metals. If you're concerned about your savings, I encourage you to have a free consultation with a Birch Gold precious metals specialist. The first step is to text my name, Dinesh, to 989898. You get a free, no obligation information kit on gold. Learn how to hold gold and silver in a tax-sheltered account. Birch Gold will help you to convert an existing IRA or 401k into a gold IRA for no money out of pocket. Debbie and I buy our gold from Birch Gold. Isn't it time you did too? Birch Gold has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. Thousands of happy customers. So go ahead, text my name, Dinesh, to the number 989898.